at a higher level, how do you think these governance issues will play out here? You have the top two leaders now being criticized for both being asleep at the wheel, essentially.
Yeah, from a governance perspective, we have to remember that Facebook is a control company. So Mark Zuckerberg controls all the voting in the company. The board serves at his pleasure. So I'm not sure that they're really going to play out differently. I think the bigger issue is the backlash from users, yes, from shareholders, but even more importantly from advertisers. Right now, those are the people that can really vote with their feet. Users have already shown, going back to some of the original issues with Facebook earlier in the year, that users aren't walking away from the platform. They're not walking away from Facebook. They're not walking away from Instagram or WhatsApp.
That said, we do have a survey, a poll conducted by YouGov that shows Facebook is one of the country's least trusted institutions. Amazon and Google, meantime, fall right behind. The top-ranked military, and Facebook is in the bottom three. So, Kyle, at what point do we see users revolting?
I think it's very challenging for users to revolt, and there's a few reasons for that. First is that there's tremendous positive network externalities to a network like Facebook. So the value of Facebook to me as a user is proportional in some sense to the number of people who are on there, and that's why someone like myself is on Facebook, but I'm not on new social network number 5. This makes it very difficult for incumbents or for new entrants to compete with Facebook, but it also makes it very difficult for existing users to get off the platform. I think second, as a user on Facebook, if I'm in my 20s or 30s, it's possible I've lived my whole life on Facebook. And while I can export my data, I'm not going to get the picture that someone took of me at a party or the conversations that are in private communities. So I think users are, for better or for worse, stuck on Facebook to some extent. And it's my contention that as long as users are there, there's going to be advertisers there too.
That's an interesting point because, what makes Facebook good is also what makes Facebook vulnerable, right? Makes it a platform vulnerable to interference that foreign actors want to exploit. Michael, are advertisers really going to walk away? We have not seen that in the earnings.
We haven't seen it, but now what's happened is the difference is Facebook having something happen on its platform that it wasn't aware of versus Facebook doing some specific things, including opposition research and opposition opinions and getting out other points of view, advertisers are going to be under pressure. The bigger issue, it's not just the things that the New York Times recorded and reported on. It's also other things that happened that weren't impacted by Russians and foreign actors. It's the voter suppression. It's some hate groups. And so Facebook has a big challenge ahead of it in order to be able to correct all these. And I'm not sure they're able to easily get a handle on it, given the widespread 2 billion people using the platform.
That's an important point. I did get a chance to go into Facebook's election war room where they were working around the clock to prevent election interference, and they said that the majority of the activity, the malicious activity or the inauthentic activity that they're seeing is coming from domestic actors, not from foreign actors. I want to talk about leadership because, on a press call yesterday, Mark Zuckerberg defended himself and also defended Sheryl Sandberg. He said, I think Sheryl was also not involved. She learned about this at the same time that I did, talking here about the work with this controversial firm, the Definers. Zuck went on to say, Sheryl is doing great work for the company. She's been a very important partner to me, continues to be, will continue to be. She's leading a lot of the efforts to improve our systems in these areas. And as I have tried to convey, while there are big issues, I think we're making a lot of progress. A lot of that is because of the work that she is doing. Kyle, the board has come out saying, in a very unusual statement to hear from the Facebook board, that yes, they did push Sandberg and Zuckerberg to move faster on this stuff, but that they continue to support their leadership. I mean, do you sense any real change happening in Mark Zuckerberg being the CEO and chair of this company and Sheryl Sandberg being his number 2?
Well, for the same reasons articulated earlier, namely Mark's controlling shares in the company, I don't see a change being forced upon them. I do think there's probably going to be substantial change in terms of the way the leadership governs itself and the way they behave, and potentially the way the board interacts with the leadership. So, for example, you can imagine a very astute thing to do might be to convene an investigative panel chaired by one of the respected board members that's able to work independently within the company to investigate how Facebook handled this issue.
So you are suggesting that the board launch an internal investigation of Facebook and how they handled these issues specifically?
So I think this is a very reasonable thing. First, Erskine Bowles obviously comes off looking very good in the New York Times piece as an advocate for further investigation into this issue. And I think even if we take Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg at face value and believe that they are doing their utmost now to rectify this issue, the fact is they've probably lost the faith of users, advertisers, other stakeholders in Facebook. So it's probably good for someone else to be seen who is independent leading on this issue.
Michael, what do you think about the pushback from lawmakers here? We have Senator Amy Klobuchar sending a letter to the DOJ. She tweeted about this following these reports that they'd hired this outside contractor to spread misinformation on critics. You know, again, this is something that Facebook has pushed back on. They said they never paid for fake news, paid to spread misinformation. But what do you think about the pushback from Congress now?
Well, I mean, certainly somewhere at Facebook, heads are going to roll. I doubt it's going to be anybody in the most senior management. In the same way that Mark Zuckerberg is responsible for the user growth and the product and experience for consumers, Sheryl has been responsible for Facebook becoming a large-scale business. I think that lawmakers, of course, there's going to be hearings about this. This is going to be a very political issue, especially given the overall backlash against tech in Congress. I still don't think that there's no specific legislation. There's nothing that's really going to limit Facebook's ability to grow as a company.
Kyle, one last question for you. You know, we've been reporting on the morale at Facebook, you know, employees in the cafeteria, very quiet, you know, talking in these internal chat rooms, you know, some people saying, you know, I can't believe I've been sitting here and helping these people who've just made so much money off of my efforts, and others saying, look, I admire Sheryl Sandberg because it's hard to run a global company, and it seems like she's been pretty savvy. I mean, I think we forget that this is a company that has to continue to run and keep its employees on side. How do Sandberg and Zuckerberg do that when clearly there are leaks about their efforts, about some of their internal conversations, and keep the troops rallied?
I think that's a very challenging problem, and it's not just a problem for their existing employees. I see Yale students every day, many of whom are recruiting into Facebook, and all of them ask me, should I go to Facebook now? Is it a good time to go here? Do I have a future there? Will this company be around in the most extreme case? Or is it a good company in which to spend my life? And so you can see this is the kind of thing that makes this an existential threat for the company, because they're, of course, in competition for the best and the brightest talent with Google, Apple, Microsoft, and all these other companies. So I think your question really, I wish I knew the answer to your question. I don't. I think it's a very big challenge, not just motivating the current employees, but creating a company culture that attracts the best and the brightest for the future.